So I would now like to introduce the first keynote of the day, which in this Open Science Conference that is organized here in the James headquarters, traditionally it is offered to UNESCO. And I want to invite our colleague, Ms. Anna Persic, who is a program specialist at the division of UNESCO that we collaborate with, which is the Division of Capacity Building, to manage the next segment, which is the first keynote of the day.
Great, thank you very much, Thanos, and thank you for everybody to join us today. I mean, it is incredible that we have some 100 people in the room and some 500 and more connected online. Even more than that? About 3,000, okay. So I stand corrected, 3,000. I thought it was 500 and I was already impressed. But it really does show that there is a great interest in the subject of open science, the subject of science that is more accessible, that is more inclusive, more equitable, and that really caters to the needs of the populations today. It is my great pleasure also on behalf of UNESCO, of course, to be in this conference in collaboration with the UN Library and UNDESA. We are very grateful that we were able to have this conference also here at the United Nations headquarters. And hopefully we will be able to continue this collaboration in the future, because obviously every year, every 2 years, we have some new advancements in the area of open science, and then we have some new challenges also that we have to tackle together. So many thanks again to our co-organizers and organizers of today's conference, and of course all the participants as well. And it is also now my very great pleasure to introduce our keynote this morning, Shamila Nair-Bedouelle, who is the Assistant Director General for Natural Sciences at UNESCO. Shamila will be joining us virtually from Paris. We see you on the screen, Shamila. Thank you very much for joining. And before I give her the floor, I would just very briefly like to introduce her to the audience here. So Shamila Nair-Bedouelle took up her duties as the UNESCO Assistant Director General for Natural Sciences in April 2019, so it's going to be almost 4 years now. And she came to UNESCO from UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme, where she served as the director of the Ozone Action Programme since 2012. Shamila is a fellow scientist. Her background is in life sciences, and she has a PhD in life sciences from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. She had her research career at the French Institut Pasteur and also worked at the pharmaceutical industry at the MIT University Park in Boston. Dr. Nair-Bedouelle also worked at the European Commission, coordinated scientific research programs between the European Union and developing countries. So with these words of introduction, Shamila, you have the floor, and we will be moving the slides from here, if that's okay.
Thank you. Anna, thank you very much for your kind introduction. And before I start, let me greet His Excellency, Mr. Saba Korochi, Ms. Melissa Fleming, Mrs. Maria Francesca Spatolizano, and also I would like to sincerely thank the Dag Hammarskjöld Library, the UN Library, and UNDESA. It really is a great pleasure for me to address you here today on behalf of UNESCO. And I will thank you, Anna, for the first slide. Thank you. Anna, is the sound okay? Because I can hear me.
It is very good. We hear you very well here in the room. Yes, and okay. Online as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So thanks very much to Anna, my colleague from UNESCO Paris, for introducing me and organizing this event with the UN Library and with UNDESA. Now, dear colleagues, excellencies, and participants, I would like to give you a small overview of UNESCO's role in science to the service of humanity. And this particular slide up on the screen really sums it all. UNESCO's vision is a vision of world at peace and could not be a world without science. So we do need science for peace. And on the next slide, you will see science is really at the core of the SDGs. I've had the pleasure to listen to our previous speakers and especially His Excellency Mr. Korosi on the SDGs being off track. Well, I think science does hold the core of the SDGs together, and through science we can achieve the SDGs. But we do need certain normative instruments, collaboration, cooperation, and solidarity. And I think this slide also summarizes Melissa's opening on open science. We need open science to deliver on the economic, social, and environmental sustainability. We need science, technology, and innovation as really the potential to deliver on all of the SDGs. Now, on the next slide, I would like to share with you, which is a poster, which you will also see behind me. We produced the UNESCO Science Report in the middle of the pandemic. And the title was called, "We Are in a Race Against Time for Smarter Development." Are we using science to build the future we want? And we have seen in this science report, which monitors the progress of science over 4 years, that countries of all income countries are in a dual transition towards green societies and digital societies. But there are also development priorities being prioritized over the years, such as science, technology, innovation, at the heart of all the different agendas across the world. But the world is alarmingly off track to achieve the SDGs. And how can science contribute to that? How can open science contribute to this? Well, let's look at a couple of examples where science can play a very critical role towards the SDGs. We have on this slide water. Water is the connector. Every drop counts. When we notice that this particular SDG is very much off track, and we have seen that populations who are using safely managed sanitation surfaces have increased from 28% in 2000 to 54% in 2020. At this rate, we will not reach the SDGs. 26% of the global population around the world still lacks safely managed drinking water, including 771 million without basic drinking water. And that means 3.6 billion people worldwide still lack safely managed sanitation, including 1.7 billion people who still do not have basic sanitation facilities. And the question we can ask is why, when, as Nelson Mandela often said to us, we need to put a face to science. How to put a face to science when we see the SDGs alarmingly off track, when we can boast of putting people up on the moon and in the cosmos? What have we done wrong? Well, on the next slide, you will see maybe some alarming information on the gaps in access to scientific information. Here you will see the share and percentage of SDG-related scientific articles in open access being shared across the world, which is really very low. And we see only 33% of articles on water issues are in the open access, while almost 60% of articles on health issues are in open access. We have seen that this pandemic has revealed wedges between different countries and even within countries. The pandemic has revealed a pandemic of information, a pandemic of technology access, and a pandemic of knowledge and access to knowledge. Now, this unequal access to knowledge in the next slide was flared up during the pandemic. What did we see? We saw 70% of all scientific publications are locked behind paywalls, as the previous speakers have mentioned, Maria Francesca and Melissa. And we had 85% of COVID-19 related publications are open access, which is already a good way forward and a good progress. And then we have noticed that for climate change, 50% of the publications are still locked behind paywalls. Now, on the next slide, you will see the persisting gaps in science, technology, and innovation. And this is quite revealing. On only 20% or 2.01% are actually available and open, and others are quite locked. So this reveals glaring problems in sharing scientific information, which therefore brings us to the need for open science. On the next slide. We need to overcome these global challenges. We must accelerate the achievement of the SDGs. But for that, we need more reliable, accessible, efficient, equitable, transparent, collaborative, inclusive science that can lead to innovative and sustainable solutions, local solutions for global problems. And that is where UNESCO has stepped into this arena, building science communities for over 76 years now. Now, the need for open science came out very open during the pandemic, but also because of the economic, social, and climatic challenges that we face today. And on this slide, you will see that open science has the potential to make science more accessible, more connected to societal needs. And as per Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to freely share in scientific advancement and its benefits. I want to say here, this is the reason why we all gathered here today in this third Open Science Conference. And I must really thank the Dag Hammarskjöld Library, UNDESA, for bringing us here today and inviting UNESCO to this dialogue and to share with you what UNESCO can offer to the world. Well, UNESCO's 193 member states recognize the need for normative instrument on open science, a need for international policy, for action framework, a need for common definition of open science, shared set of values and principles. And over several years, UNESCO led the dialogue with this multitude of international, intergovernmental scientific programs across the world, bringing together thousands of partners to debate, understand the role for open science. And in 2021, the UNESCO General Assembly adopted the first ever international standard setting instrument on open science in the form of a UNESCO recommendation on open science. Now, what are the highlights of such a recommendation? Is it possible? Is it accessible? And the answer is yes. This is a global standard for open science for all. It is the first international normative instrument on open science. It contains the first internationally agreed definition of open science based on cultures, regional perspectives, partners, stakeholders. It spells out the consensus core values and guiding principles of open science. It addresses multiple actors, stakeholders, and their roles. But it also recommends actions on different levels on how to operationalize the principles of open science. And this UNESCO Open Science recommendation proposes innovative approaches for open science at different stages of the entire science cycle. But it also calls for the development of a comprehensive open science monitoring framework. Now, very briefly on this slide, we would have shared with you already, open science really makes knowledge openly available and accessible and reusable for everyone. It increases scientific cooperations and collaborations for the benefit of science and society at a time when we see funding really at stake and very difficult to obtain funding for basic scientific research. Open science enables countries to access ongoing research and also promote further partnerships in the spirit of international scientific solidarity. So it also opens the process of scientific knowledge co-creation, co-sharing, co-evaluation, and communication beyond the traditional scientific communities and borders. So this is really open science and opening scientific borders. So the open science comprises all of the scientific disciplines, as you will see here on this slide. It also includes the basic and the applied sciences, the natural, social sciences, and the humanities. Now, on this slide gives you an overview of key areas of action where we are encouraging all the member states to prioritize 7 areas in their implementation of this recommendation. And we at UNESCO will be able to support you in this initiative and help you take it forward from a national, regional, global perspective. So countries are encouraged to promote the common understanding, to develop an enabling environment for open science, to invest in infrastructure services, but also to invest in training, education, digital literacy, capacity building, and to foster this culture of open science. We at UNESCO will also provide you with access to all the international scientific networks and programs that UNESCO has built up over 76 years, so that we can create this multi-stakeholder, international stakeholders for the objectives of sharing scientific knowledge and information. Now, the key challenges, which we are fully aware of at UNESCO, are from left to right: the change in the conventional science culture, the human institutional capacity, but also adequate infrastructures, including reliable internet connectivity to access scientific information, but not only to access it, but to be able to interpret it, translate it, and use it at national level. Then, of course, there is the alignment of incentives, the revision of criteria for the evaluation of scientific excellence and scientific careers, where we would plead as UNESCO that developing country perspectives, small islands, developing states, must be considered in this revision of criteria for the evaluation of scientific excellence. And the last point here, the key challenge we know, is addressing the unintended negative consequences of open science practices. Now, the implementation of this recommendation has already started. We're working with partners across the world, developing series of supporting tools, technical briefs, fact sheets. We are collecting and mapping open science policies and strategies. We are sharing best practices. We're also analyzing open science financing mechanisms and incentives, and we are promoting open science infrastructures, building capacity, and we are developing what is called the Open Science Monitoring Framework. But UNESCO is not alone in this. We depend upon all the UN agencies, partners, and multi-stakeholder partners, publishing houses, young scientists across the world, but also at national level, to support this initiative and the movement of open science. At regional level, we are already hosting numerous regional fora. For example, the forum in Latin America called CILAC, the Africa Open Science Platform, the Arab Open Science Platform. We're also working with the Asia and Pacific on different open science platforms. We're supporting member states to exchange best practices. And we're also looking at best practices in open science at the institutional level. So we are also championing institutions in the regions who are able to take this on board and provide opportunities for others in terms of capacity building and training. On this slide, you will see the Open Science Toolkit that has been developed by UNESCO with other UN agencies, with our partners and stakeholders. These are guidebooks, checklists, fact sheets, and we have open indexes and open science resources. Now, the guides, checklists, and fact sheets are all readily available, and we invite you, please, to widely distribute them, and we're also translating them in different languages. On the next slide, please. You could see the next slide. Anna, thank you. Sorry, Anna. Can't hear you.
Yeah.
As part of the guide, we're also looking at engaging society in the open science dialogue to nurture the open science hardware and software. We are empowering journalism in open science and the open dialogue with other knowledge systems like local indigenous knowledge populations. And we are also working with publishing houses, as I mentioned previously, but also looking at intellectual property rights and open science. We need to overcome the challenges for the implementation of open science. And on the last slide, I would say that we are really looking forward to working with you. We must make this work. We must trust in science. There is no other way. So we welcome you to join the global open science movement. We need science for social justice. Science for social justice was the theme of the World Science Forum in Cape Town in December last year. But we cannot have science for social justice when the majority of the population do not even have access to the scientific knowledge and information which is controlled behind paywalls and patents. So I thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for inviting UNESCO, and we're looking forward to working with you. And my last point is to say, we need a new social contract for science. We need science for social justice, and we need social justice to overcome the challenges that we face today. So I call upon all the scientists across the world to join the movement. It is open science in the spirit of solidarity. I thank you sincerely, and thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Shamila. Thank you very much for the presentation, for introducing the Open Science recommendation of UNESCO, and also presenting a little bit what UNESCO has been doing to move this, the implementation of the recommendation. And we are very much looking forward to hearing also from others here in the room and online as to their actions and initiatives to forward and to move forward with the implementation of the recommendation. So I will now, we have some minutes to have a little discussion around the keynote. I would very much like people in the audience to raise their hands if you have a comment, if you have a question for Shamila, or a question just for the audience. For those who are listening online, unfortunately, we cannot give you the floor, but we do have the chat function, and I already see that there are some questions in the chat, so please do use the chat function. We will then also have these questions asked to Shamila and others in the room. So with this, let me just open the floor to questions. Are there any questions in the room first, and then we'll go online where we already have some questions. Please, the floor is yours. Okay, so maybe what we can do is to start with some of the questions that we got online. For example, one of the questions that was asked is, what is the role of teachers in the least developed countries, and how do we deal with the concerns of unskilled teachers? So basically, we are talking about science education not only for the students, but also for teachers. And Shamila, maybe you have a reply to this particular question to start the discussions.
Thank you very much, Anna. And dear colleagues, let me tell you that Anna's been working very hard with partners across the world to broker this consensus with other colleagues, and she's played a very big role in bringing together the partners. So thank you very much, and it's very good that you lead this discussion today. Thank you. Thank you for being moderator. I think in terms of the science education in UNESCO is one of our priorities. We cannot talk about the laureates and the Nobel laureates and the scientists at higher level if we do not build skills at lower level. We need to teach science beyond the traditional methods that we used previously. We must teach children the new ways of looking at science, that they would want our science for the future. So UNESCO has designed some different ways of training science teachers. And these form part of what is called the Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics Education, STEM, or it could be STEAM, Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics Education tools. We have produced microscience kits for children in classrooms, but also for teachers to help teachers understand the basics of chemistry, physics, biology, and teaching of these subjects so that they also have pleasure in teaching the science subjects. We also have developed new robotics for children so that they understand the role of engineering, physics, as well as mathematics in robotics. And we do these trainings for least developed countries, for developing countries, even for small island developing states. We train the teachers and we train students, children also, primary and secondary level. The aim is to train trainers that they would pass on the baton. So for science education, it's really critical that we train science teachers so that they're able to teach science in a very interesting way. We all know that the STEM education skills will be the 21st century work order. The 21st century work order will be based on science skills or STEM skills, and hence UNESCO has prioritized the STEM training programs. So if you'd like to sign up and benefit from the programs, please do contact Anna, and we'll be happy to work with you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Shamila, for this reply. Any other questions from the room at this stage? Yes, please go ahead. The microphone, I think there is a little button. If you could just introduce yourself, that would be great.
Thank you, Anna. Hello, Shamila. I'm Monica Granados. I am with Creative Commons and the Open Climate Campaign. Your image contrasting the number of publications that are open in health sciences and COVID-19 versus climate change publications is something that we're really familiar with here at the Open Climate Campaign. And it strikes me that the public, policymakers, doctors, all walks of life really recognize the importance of open science in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and health-related research. How do we impart this same sense of urgency for other challenges like climate change and water scarcity in the same way that there was an elicited response for COVID-19? How to impart that sense of urgency and leverage, I think, that movement around open science during the COVID-19 pandemic for some of these even possibly grander challenges that we have ahead of us, like climate change.
Anna?
Yes, please go ahead, Shamila. You have the floor.
Thank you. So thank you to Open Climate Campaign. I came from the Montreal Protocol world, and the ozone layer is recovering due to open science. So open science has already existed prior to this standard setting instrument of UNESCO. And yes, it's possible. We can adapt to climate change. We can even mitigate if science were more open, because we have demonstrated it. The Montreal Protocol has demonstrated that science can come together. We can share scientific knowledge and information to protect the common ozone layer, which protects life on Earth. So I believe that what we would need is a movement of scientists across the world. Scientists themselves need to share their scientific information. They have to twine with developing countries or with lesser fortunate countries and share their scientific information. And here I call upon publishing houses to actually share the scientific data and information. And this type of partnerships worked very well during the pandemic. As Melissa had said in her opening remarks, we have seen that the genome, the sequencing of the genome was already placed online in such a short space of time. Well, why don't we paste online also the impacts of climate change with respect to poverty, rural areas, the impact of climate change on water? This is the kind of movement we would like to call upon all of you to lead, and UNESCO would be your natural partner. In UNESCO, we are promoting capacity building in water management across the world. And we have an intergovernmental hydrological program where we build capacity of scientists through our networks to manage water, water pollution, water scarcity, impact of climate change on water, and this is freely accessible. All the programs of UNESCO are freely accessible. We have something like 80 Category 2 centers specialized in science, and they are actually also delivering on the open science spirit. So my appeal here would be that we have to take some bold action forward. We need the scientific community, we need the policymakers, we need the donors and the funders. And maybe one probably criteria for scientists to receive scientific funding is that they would make available their research to other countries. Make it available to other countries within a certain period of time. I think that this would be very important. Now, the UN Water Conference will be held in New York in March this year. And we are promoting the World Water Development Report, which is called Partnerships. And this is what it's all about. We need partnerships. We need partnerships for open science, partnerships for scientific solidarity. It is the only way that we could have, we could address the climate change challenges that we face. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Shamila. And I see Monica smiling, so I think that she's also happy with your reply. Very well. Is there any other question in the room? There are a few nice... yes, go ahead, Shamo.
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation by UNESCO. And I think.
Can you just introduce yourself, please? Maybe
how come I thought I? Yeah, my name is my name is Tiamo Mutsekwa. I'm the incoming director for the African Open Science Platform. We'll have a talk on Friday around some of the little initiatives that we are coming up with to really entrench open science in the continent. I think the issue of the dialogue between knowledge systems is quite critical, especially for the continent of Africa, and I think the global South in general. And I'm glad that the presentation by UNESCO acknowledged that, but also acknowledged the tension between open science and IP, intellectual property. And I think the World Intellectual Property Organization has done a lot of work over the years to try to address the concerns of the indigenous knowledge owners vis-a-vis ownership of some of the knowledge they have. And I think it has developed instruments like geographical indications to say such products can be traced to certain communities. So I'm just thinking aloud here. What are some of the initial thoughts that we have regarding dealing with open science, regarding engaging these knowledge owners, vis-a-vis that there's this disparity we are talking about in terms of access to information, in terms of moving fast with the knowledge they have? I think we need proactive, well-thought-out approaches when we interface with these communities for this dialogue. So really just throwing the spinners in the works about this one. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Samo, for the excellent question. Shamila, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. You've raised a very important question. And Open Science is hosted by South Africa, which also launched and hosted the World Science Forum in December. When South Africa launched the World Science Forum Declaration, Science for Social Justice, they meant all types of science, the social science, the natural sciences, the humanities, but also the science that comes from local indigenous knowledge holders, because that is a science as well. And we really need to bring them on board in the climate change discussions, but also in biodiversity management and in general. This is a knowledge stream that we cannot afford to lose. And within the open science recommendation, they are acknowledged as knowledge holders to be respected as all other knowledge streams. So we fully agree with you that we need to consider how this knowledge will be integrated into the broader knowledge system and how to bridge these different knowledge streams together, but respecting them and acknowledging that this is a knowledge stream that is essential for the world today. And these are ongoing discussions, and we welcome discussing with you as well. Anna and her team have held numerous meetings across the world with different partnerships, and every region have their own way of looking at the role of local indigenous knowledge populations and their contributions to the open science itself. Because their knowledge is also being open and shared, but at the same time, we need to protect their knowledge. So just as we protect the knowledge coming out of laboratories, high-scale laboratories, we need to protect this knowledge as well, which is passed on generation to generation and may not always be captured or valorized. So this is the role of open science, is to value all these knowledge networks too. And we look forward to working with you on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shamila. And indeed, we do have this open science working groups that we have established, and anybody is free to join. They are open. You just check them online. You just register for a meeting. And in the future, we will, in the very near future, we will definitely look into this question of other knowledge systems and how do we incorporate other knowledge systems into open science, again, in the most equitable and just way. I have a couple of questions also online. Some of the questions have already been replied to, but I think we have a lot of librarians who are connected with us here today. And they are asking Shamila, how can the librarians be more involved in UNESCO science activities and in particular in the Open Science Initiative?
Thank you, Anna. I think we could answer this from very different perspectives. When we look at library in the old traditional sense, we entered a library and we saw books everywhere. In the libraries we see today, we see a hybrid library with books around and everything else on the internet. Now, when we look at just books themselves, a number of countries across the world cannot afford to even access the information in these books or to buy these books. So how could libraries across the world support the Open Science Initiative? I would like to appeal to all the libraries to assist in sharing the information they have and the documentation they have, the wealth of knowledge that libraries hold, and putting these online, really accessible and available. A number of journals today are inaccessible to countries in the South, and this is rather unfair and really not in the spirit of international solidarity that we all speak about. So we have to promote science beyond borders. And doing so will be also accessing the scientific information through online and open access. And we are working with the communication and information sector in UNESCO on open access to scientific knowledge and information. And we look forward to working with the librarians to assisting us in how we at UNESCO could continue to promote the open science through the libraries, because the libraries play a very important role. I think the libraries could also do some training for numerous journals that they host and encourage those journals to go online and open these online journals to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Shamila. And indeed, libraries really are, and librarians are an important part of the open science ecosystem and a very, very important actor across the world. So we really are very keen to working with them, and particularly also through the connections of the UN Library to see how we can better promote open science on both sides, from the librarians towards UNESCO and the other way around. Is there any other question? Yes, please, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Loida Garcia Fibo. I am the chair of the American Library Association United Nations Subcommittee. So hello to everybody. I will moderate a session tomorrow. I'm very glad to hear Dr. Nair-Bedouelle talked about the welcoming librarians to the UNESCO world. I have also collaborated with the IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations, and we have done other projects with other UNESCO units. So I will pass your message gladly and look forward to continue collaborations.
Thank you very, very much. And thank you for joining the UNESCO world. I'm sure you always have been part of it. Perhaps we don't realize that, but thank you very much. I would say that the libraries could also play a very important role in hosting scientific seminars, especially for children, and holding some scientific webinars. I have seen in certain libraries, there's nothing in the library itself, but everything is virtual. So children could enter the library and have an access to the scientific world. And what better way to stimulate scientific creativity of children than being in a library? So I humbly plead with you and call upon you to join this initiative and help us to relay the world of open science to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shamila. And indeed, I mean, building a science culture and science literacy is an important part of open science. And it was also mentioned in the opening speeches how important it is to have the public who is also science savvy and who trusts science. So again, libraries have a very important role to play in that regard as well. Is there any other questions from the floor? Yes, Thanos, please. No difficult questions.
I'm trying to hold my role
Thank
here,
you, Anna.
but so I just wanted to bring the outcomes of the second United Nations Open Science Conference into the third one, where we did talk about libraries with Professor Guidon, and there were some wonderful suggestions about the platforms and the, as we sort of like coined it at that moment, the platform power. So there are thousands of libraries around the world that are hosting very powerful repositories. We are one of those, and that repository is actually 4 years old, four and a half years old, I think, and it has already reached a status of source of reference. So I think libraries with funding agencies can definitely experiment widely on the platform power. And I think that is a core thing for open science. And I'm sure that many libraries, a lot of academic libraries are sort of like getting into that. So just a comment. My question, and perhaps is the elephant in the room, and I was mentioned before, is the intellectual property rights. And, it is the elephant in the room. So I know there's no exact solution. I want to take it from perspective of the intergovernmental organizations. So we talk the talk. I think IGOs also need to do some work on walking the walk on those parts. And then, of course, offer inspiration to the world regarding intellectual property rights and the democratization of the record of science. So not exactly a question, don't have a solution, but we're here to discuss about everything.
Yes, maybe just another follow-up question, Shamila, and then we will let you reply. Go ahead, please. And if you could just introduce yourself also.
Yes, hello, my name is Cable Green. I'm the Director of Open Knowledge at Creative Commons. And I just wanted to introduce myself because intellectual property rights have been brought up multiple times. If anybody either in the room or online ever needs support in that area, Creative Commons is more than happy to assist. And that goes for the IGOs and other organizations. We regularly work with national governments, with institutions of education, with libraries, with funders to actually set the default to open. And so oftentimes we are working with governments to ensure that publicly funded resources are open by default, be them scientific research or data or educational resources or software or whatever else is being created. Because we, like many of you, fundamentally believe that science and education and all of the things that we need to solve the SDGs are digital public goods and need to be shared clearly with legal terms that allow for full reuse rights. And if anybody needs any support, please do reach out to me. I have lots of business cards. I'll be happy to share my email. For those of you online, I can be found at cable@creativecommons.org. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Cable. Shamila, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you to Thanos and to Creative Commons. I think this is a very delicate question and subject. We at UNESCO have had numerous discussions with WIPO and they offered us their full support as well in this initiative. And I want to thank them sincerely because it's not a very easy subject. We have patents that generate R&D and then access to knowledge, which is also part of the global public commons. And this is a delicate balance between the two. Now, in different regions of the world, you do have regional institutes. Like in Africa, we had the Africa Intellectual Property Organization, AIPO, in other parts of the world, you have similar patent organizations. I think it's very important, like institutions such as the Creative Commons provide some capacity building to them, for them understanding the innovation and their research, and how they could make this also accessible, but at the same time assist them in gaining access to the rest of the knowledge in the world, because that's the aim of these intellectual property organizations, is to promote also cooperation and collaboration, sharing data. We have said in the Open Science recommendation that science should be as open as possible and closed as necessary. And we have also called upon the funders to consider the role of open science in scientific data sharing in the spirit of solidarity. But I think something we did not touch upon in terms of intellectual property rights is the local indigenous knowledge holders, and how that would actually be part of the intellectual property regime, but also be shared in the open science initiative as knowledge bearers and sharing of their knowledge within an open science ecosystem. And I think these are still questions to be answered, and we look forward to working with you. But I want to sincerely thank you all. We do need science. We need more and better science. We need to unite behind the science, and we need more respect for science. But we also need more women in science. We need more children in science. They will only come on board if we make it as open as possible. We need to encourage the next generation of scientists, and that's the children of today, because they'll be the leaders of tomorrow. Opening up science will enable them access numerous different job opportunities, because science, technology, engineering, mathematics, education is going to be the new work order of the future. And that is also another reason why we're opening up science and want to enable science to be more accessible, inclusive, transparent, and more efficient science systems. Besides these socio-economic and global challenges that the world faces, we also need creative thinkers to find solutions for the challenges we face and for the future. But we also need science for the good of science and for its creativity and creative thinking. Thank you very much. Looking forward to working with you and taking the movement of open science forward. Thank you, Anna, for putting this together. Greatly appreciate. Thanks to you and the team, to Ezra, to all those who contributed. Thank you very much.